Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So it's time for the 2-year update on my Mustang Mach-E. So I bought my Mach-E in June of 2022 and it's now late August 2024. So I've had the car a little over 2 years. I have a little over 19,000 miles on it, and in general, it's been pretty great, but I want to tell you a little bit more about it. So my Mach-E is the standard range battery, all-wheel drive, premium trim model. So it has the smaller battery, it's about 70 kilowatt hours usable. This is the NCM battery. In mid-2023, they went to the LFP battery for the standard range model. It's all-wheel drive, it means it has a motor in the front and the rear. The GT has a larger motor in the front, so it's not quite as fast as the GT, but it's still got pretty good performance. And then the premium trim gives you some extra features, a little nicer appearance, a little nicer headlights, glossy fenders, glass roof, BlueCruise, stuff like that. So that's the configuration I have. If I had to do it all over again, this is probably the configuration I would actually pick because, you know, the standard range battery around town is plenty of range for me. I think commuting for most people, it's going to be plenty of range. You know, on road trips, I have road tripped this car a few times. It would be nice to have a little bit more range, and the all-wheel drive option still gives you more performance than, you know, a base model with only the rear motor. Also, in the winter, the all-wheel drive system definitely helps get you going. These tires are not great for winter driving, so if you're planning a lot of winter driving, you're probably going to want different tires. And then the premium trim, it's definitely nice to have some of those extra creature comforts. I like how the car looks. And so yeah, I think that's the configuration I would go with. You know, the newer models have that LFP battery option, which just does charge a little bit faster. You can charge to 100%. It's actually good for it to charge to 100%, so I would definitely check that out. And then the other option is if you're looking more for used vehicles, you know, I would consider looking at a used GT because then you're going to get the extra range, the faster charging, more performance. I would also look at used premium trim or really used any Mach-E's, especially if you can get something that doesn't have a ton of miles on it. It probably still has a lot of battery life left in it. So yeah, what has Ford really done to this car since I bought it? The first big one is BlueCruise 1.3. So this car came with BlueCruise 1.0, which is hands-free interstate driving basically. And then they've made a few updates, and BlueCruise 1.3, I just got that within the last month or two here. I have a whole video about that if you want to see more detail, but generally 1.3 adds lane change capability. So you can now just tap your blinker, the car will change lanes if possible. It'll also reposition you in the lane. So if you're going by a semi or a semi is going to pass you, the car will move a little bit over in the lane away from the semi, or even I've seen larger vehicles like a large pickup truck with a trailer. It'll move over for that as well. So that's a big update. I didn't have those features when I bought the car, and now I do, so that's pretty cool. Also, this still is a CCS charge port, CCS1. So it has the J1772 on top and then the DC pins on the bottom. You know, with the whole industry switching, at least it's looking like switching to the Tesla NACS adapter, you know, what does that mean for this? Well, Ford is working with Tesla, and so are other automakers now, to provide adapters to allow this car to charge on Tesla's SuperCharger network. Which is awesome. Now, it's not all SuperChargers. If you're familiar with SuperChargers, there's several different versions. The CCS cars with the adapters that are enabled can only charge on the V3 network, and not even all the V3s. So you can look on Tesla's website on the map. You can also look in the infotainment in the car, and it'll show you which ones you can charge at with the adapter. I'm still waiting on my adapter. Ford is providing them for free for owners of these cars. They extended the deadline for when you could sign up for your free adapter, so that's coming to a close soon. I have not gotten my free adapter yet. I was supposed to get it in June 2024. I ordered it within 3 hours of when they went live for ordering in February 2024. And it's saying estimated ship date of September 2024. They've also made some other updates on the infotainment and features in the car. So the volume knob was originally just, that's it. It just changed the volume. And now it can also adjust your climate temperature up and down, your fan speed up and down. So whatever you click on, you can adjust that now with the volume knob. So it's kind of a multi-purpose knob now. So that's pretty cool. I had a complaint in the last video about the audio system. It sounds good, but not great, especially the low end doesn't seem like there's much there. And so Ford actually pushed an audio update to this car, and I don't know exactly what they did, but it sounds better. I can hear the subwoofer that's in the trunk. I can hear that more from the driver's seat. So it feels like they turned up the amplifier on kind of the low end. And so it just sounds more balanced and it sounds better. All access, all zones update, where the car is just more responsive if you're using phone as a key or even just the regular key fob. It's more responsive to knowing when you're near the car no matter what angle you're coming from. And so that has helped with the whole door lock and unlock issue. It's still not perfect. So some consistent ongoing issues I still have is just general access to getting in the car. Like I said, the door lock and unlock has gotten better, but it still just feels like an event to open the door. You know, this has to sense a phone or a key is nearby. It has to open with this electronic actuator, and it just feels like an event every time you want to get in the car. When it works, it's fine. I would just still prefer a simple door handle. I'm still not sold it's the best way to go long term. I also, as you can see, the mirrors just closed there. So it's called walk away lock. So when I walk away from the car, it will lock. As I was mentioning in a prior video, there's a little capacitive touch pad here to lock the car. But a lot of times I'll hit that on accident when I'm trying to unlock the car, and then it takes an extra second or so for it to unlock. I'm actually not sure why the walk away lock triggered. I have phone as a key set up, but I still have my key fob right here. So there's just stuff like that where it's just still not totally refined. I would say the key fob, I don't typically have any problems getting the door to open. Sometimes it takes a second for the car to wake up after you push the button, even with the key fob. Phone as a key is a little bit less reliable. It's gotten better, but again, it's not seamless. It's still something that I deal with on a regular basis where the door won't open. And sometimes that's because the app crashed on the phone. Sometimes it's because the car just hasn't woken up yet. And there's still times when everything works great. I start driving, and then if I'm using phone as a key, it'll all of a sudden say key not detected on the screen. There is the keypad here and a passcode you can use inside, but that's just even less convenient. It will also do this thing where if the car is running and there's no key detected in the car, it will honk the horn. And it's just really loud and really annoying. Okay, so from this distance, I have the key fob here. It is responding. Okay, we're further away here. And here it's not responding. Okay, right there it starts to pick it up. Okay, it's not responding from here. Oh, there, it just picked it up. And I feel like there's been times where I've been like this close and yep, see right now. Oh yeah, I had to press it twice for it to respond. Okay, now it thinks I'm approaching the car, but it's not responding to any of the button commands. Let's try and open the trunk. Okay, it opened that. But yeah, see, it's not responding to lock commands or unlock. Alarm? Yep, okay. Okay, now it locked. I do think the key fob looks really nice. But there's no front trunk button on here. There's a blank space where one could be. I've talked about it before, but just the buttons inside the car, you know, left of the steering wheel as you're about to get out of the car, there's traction control, defrost, screen brightness, headlights, but you know, over there or anywhere, there's no physical button to open the rear trunk. There is a manual release you can pull for the front trunk, but the rear, you have to use the touchscreen or use the phone or use the button on the key fob. And there's just a lot of times when you jump out of the car, turn it off, and then you're like, oh, I wanted to open the trunk. Well, you can push the button on the back of the trunk, but that's not real convenient. Or the other times I've had is my wife needs something in the back. I just turned the car, I'm about to jump out. She's waiting back there. And the only way to unlock it is to either have her push the button or turn the car back on, wait for the screen to boot back up to push the button. So would really love a physical button for the trunk. There you can see it locked again, even though I'm standing right here with the key fob. Yeah, that whole system still needs some work. Also want to talk about the software in the car. You know, like I said, it's gotten some great software updates. It got the SuperCharger update, the BlueCruise update, the knob update, but it's still just fairly bare bones. It's passable, but you know, it's nowhere near like using a modern smartphone, or you know, if you're familiar with Tesla, you know, I don't drive one on a regular basis, but I have used their infotainment a couple times, and it's just so much more fluid, responsive, and the Mach-E just isn't that. Now, it's also not terrible, it's completely usable, but it's just a little slow, and you also wonder how much, you know, horsepower is really under the hood there. It feels like, you know, they're gonna have to either trim down that software, or for future models, start adding, you know, some more computer hardware there to make that faster and more responsive. And we still have this 1 mile/hour software bug. Let's see, I'm in park and it shows 1 mile an hour. It still just feels like there's a lot of potential. Obviously all the BlueCruise stuff, they can make more updates there, but even just stuff on the display, the center screen has gotten a little bit nicer, but you know, the driver display is really the main screen that really hasn't got any attention at all the whole time I've owned the car. It's just so basic. You know, Ford kind of prides themselves on, you know, well, at least we have a driver display. You know, the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y, they don't have a driver display. They only have the center display. That's true, but the driver display is just so bare bones. There's just very little information there. You have battery percentage, you have your range, you have your speed, what gear you're in, and then any warning lights, which that sounds like quite a bit of information, but with how nice this display is and right there, it feels like you could add a lot more, especially more info about the car. It feels like you could add temperature information about the motors, you could add motor RPM, you could add charging speed. This still will not show you what your charging speed is when you're at a DC fast charger. It'll tell you what time it's going to be done, but it will not say the kilowatt speed on the display. Ford did update the FordPass app on your phone to show that, which is nice. And if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the phone, because if I walk away from the car, I want to see what my speed is. But still, like, that still is not on the display. There's a FordPass update for the Apple Watch, and it'll show state of charge and if it's charging. And then you can also lock and unlock the car from here. So unlocking. There it goes. Ford also updated the FordPass phone app with a new design. Most of the functionality is still the same. Instead of an on-off button, they replaced it with a fan climate icon. There's still no way to adjust the temperature or see what the temperature is inside the car. The Bluetooth controls are still the same. It's also easier to see details about your current charging session. And for charging at saved locations, you can now more easily adjust the charging limit and easily override the limit. Even though this has 3 driving modes, they hardly change anything on the display. They just change the background, and that's about it. So would like to see them do more with that. I think you could add a lot more helpful information and also just make it more interesting and engaging. How about dash cam recording? You know, there's no dash cam recording available in this car. It's got cameras all over it. You can't do any recording. There's no camping mode. There's no pet mode. So you can't, you know, easily have the car stay on and show the temperature on the screen like Tesla does. You know, you can camp in the car, but a lot of times you're going to have to be resetting the timeout for when the car would shut off. You know, your screen is going to be bright, so you're going to have to kind of manually override a few things to get the screen to go dark. So it's just little stuff like that that I think Ford could add a lot of nice improvements and features. All right, well, I got some more stuff to tell you, you know, how it drives, my thoughts on the interior, infotainment, all that. So let's hop in the car and go for a drive. All right, so even though the touchscreen isn't super responsive, what is nice is because there is the physical knob in the car, you can quickly shift into gear and go right away. You don't have to flip anything on the screen. So from a driving experience standpoint, and this is one of the things I really like about the car, is it's just so smooth. I mean, this is pretty typical for, you know, a new electric car, you know, kind of this generation of electric cars over the last, you know, 5-ish years. There's no, you know, transmission really. It's basically direct drive from the electric motors. And so you don't have multiple gears to shift, and just whenever you put your foot down, it goes. And that's just really satisfying and really fun. You know, I had a manual Mustang GT before this, so I do miss shifting gears. But, you know, I have to say I like this better than an automatic transmission where it feels like you're never in quite the right gear. In addition to how smooth the acceleration is, just, you know, everything about the car is just very smooth. It feels pretty refined. with the exception of the suspension. This has come up in a lot of reviews about this car, and I have to say it's pretty true. On a road like this, these, kind of roads where you're going, 45, 50, 60, interstate driving, you're gonna have a really smooth ride most of the time. The car feels really planted. It has a fairly long wheelbase for the size of car it is. And all the weight of the battery in the bottom, it just feels very planted on the road. You don't really get blown around much by the wind. But anytime you start going over uneven surfaces, anytime the road gets uneven, especially at like lower speeds, if you're, going over some kind of uneven pavement through an intersection, or you're turning over uneven pavement, that's when the car starts to kind of feel bouncy, especially in the back. And it's not like a firm suspension like you'd have in a sports car. It's like take that abrupt jar and have it be less jarring, but have you travel more distance. So it's like you're kind of like on the end of a spring almost. It's hard to describe, but it just doesn't feel great. I've heard the GT, which has the Magna ride, that really takes care of a lot of those issues. I also wish this car had wider tires. I mean, yeah, I understand the skinnier tires for better range. This runs 225 width tires, and I'd really love to know how much range would you lose if you went to 245 or 255 width tires. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it more than that? If it's 5 or 10%, I think it'd be worth the trade-off, because I think the car would just handle a lot better, especially with all the weight it has and torque it has. It just feels a little squirmy on these skinnier tires. And these tires aren't great in the snow either, or on ice. Now obviously you can do aftermarket wheels and tires, and that might help a lot. And the other thing on the driving experience, so the braking, it's gonna do regenerative braking. Even if you're pushing the brake pedal itself, you can do one pedal driving with this car. If you're in one pedal, then when you let off the accelerator, it's gonna do regen. And if you're not in one pedal, right now I'm doing regen braking right here. And that all feels really great, really smooth. It's the transition between the regenerative braking with the electric motors to the friction brakes that just doesn't feel great. Some other reviewers have talked about this too. And when the car was brand new, I bought this car with less than 20 miles on it. Now, part of it was because this was my first electric car, so I didn't quite know what I was looking for, but also those brakes were brand new. And so you really couldn't tell when you were doing friction brakes or when you were doing regen, because there was no wear and tear on the brakes at all. Everything was super smooth, super dialed in there. And so it felt great all the time. So even though I don't use the actual friction brakes a lot, just because most of the time you're doing regenerative braking unless you're stopping really hard. So like if I stop like this, then I'm gonna start using the friction brakes. And then once you get to the last, basically under 5 miles an hour, then you'll use friction brakes to kind of stop the car all the way. So it feels like what's happened as the brakes have worn in a little bit, I think they're actually a little bit grippier. Like, I think the brake pad is a little bit grippier. It's obviously not this perfectly smooth rotor and perfectly smooth brake pad anymore. So that's probably adding to that. They're more grabby than they were when the car was new. And I think that's pretty typical for most braking systems. And so it feels like Ford could have some kind of software change, after X amount of miles on the car, it could adjust the friction brakes a little bit. When you're trying to slow down, it feels like that last few miles an hour, the brakes grab a little bit harder than you want. So yeah, let me stop here. So we're doing regen, doing regen, doing regen. Now we're in that coast, and then the friction brakes grab. The friction brakes also has just this little bit of this kind of groan sound as you are almost stopped. So yeah, the brakes feel like they could use a little bit of tuning. Turning radius on the car is also really great. It feels like you can easily make a U-turn even on a tighter street. There's some rattle noise either somewhere in the steering wheel or steering column. Take a listen. This has been there a long time. It started after about a few thousand miles of owning the car. It hasn't gotten any worse. It's been pretty much the same. But yeah, let's talk about other stuff. You know, when I think about this car, you know, what am I looking forward to? You know, what do I really love about the car? So, like I said, generally that driving experience, the smooth acceleration, always being in the right gear, just how practical this car is, it checks so many boxes. You know, you've got performance, you know, 0 to 60 in the low 5-second range. You've got all-wheel drive, so you've got great, you know, traction off the line. You know, with the right tires, you've got great traction in the snow. I think it's a nice size vehicle. You know, I don't really like big vehicles, or I'm not really a truck person. Maybe I will be someday, but right now I'm really not. And so it feels like this packs a lot in, where you've got great rear seat room. You know, with the glass roof, it doesn't feel too claustrophobic back there. Good leg room, good headroom. The roof line is a little bit low as you get in, so you know, you got to watch your head a bit when you're getting in the back if you're taller. You know, you've got all the modern creature comforts that you could want. You know, large infotainment screen. You've got all the new software, so wireless CarPlay, wireless charging pad, BlueCruise for the hands-free on the interstate. Obviously, it's a 4-door, so you've got great practicality with the back seat. You've got a very usable rear hatchback trunk. You've got the extra space in the front trunk, which I don't use that much on a regular basis, but on road trips, it's really nice to have. So yeah, it's just a great all-around vehicle. It feels like you can do a lot with it while still enjoying the performance. And then on top of all that practicality and performance, you have great efficiency. So this car, I have a whole video on charging costs I'll link. You know, I've saved significant money on gas because I have really low electric rates where I live. And then even road trips, I just did a road trip to Grand Tetons in this car. I'll link that video as well. But it was totally usable. Even with a smaller range battery, you can't charge as fast as a gas car. The charging stops are going to be longer than you would be most places getting gas. So you have to plan your trip a little bit differently, but if you can work your stops in with a meal stop or some activity that you're planning to do anyway, it kind of works out, and it's really not terrible. I still really love the large infotainment screen. It's really great for navigation, especially going somewhere you're not familiar with, and trying to find chargers. The 360 camera overhead, love that. You know, that's obviously not just a Mach-E thing. A lot of newer cars have that now. So I also want to talk about servicing on the Mach-E. So one of the other benefits of an electric car is generally, if things are working right, there's very little maintenance you have to do. There's no oil you have to change on a regular basis. You're not using your friction brakes nearly as much because you're doing the regen with the electric motors. So really all you have to keep an eye on is your tires. You know, the first year or so I owned it, I did end up taking it in a couple of times. One of the times was, it felt like whenever I was outside the car and the car had been running for a little while, there was kind of this fishy smell, this fishy odor. I took it in, I thought maybe the AC drip line was clogged, but they took it off. There wasn't anything clogged. So maybe the car just needed a few heat cycles and something kind of burned off there. I'm not really sure. So that still remains a bit of a mystery, but I haven't had that smell for a long time. A lot of the Mach-Es, all the early Mach-Es, were affected by a contactor weld issue. So in the high voltage battery pack, you could have a situation where the contactors that kind of connect and disconnect the high voltage battery from the motors and the other systems in the car, they could become welded closed or welded open. There was a software update for that. And at the time, Ford was saying, yeah, that's going to be an OTA, you know, over the air rollout. Well, I never got that update in the time period I was expecting. I was taking the car on a road trip. I knew I was going to DC fast charge it. As part of that visit, I also had them install that update manually. So, and then fast forward a little while later, I took it in again for its regular 10,000 mile service. And all they had to do was just rotate the tires. You know, that didn't cost me very much. It was a little over $30. And when I bought the car, I got FordPass points. And so I was able to use those FordPass points to pay for the tire rotation and inspection. The first visit with the AC and the software update, they didn't charge me anything for that. Just in the last 3 months or so, I had the car in again around 15,000 miles for three things. One, I wanted them to just rotate the tires again since I was already going to be in there. I also had a notice from Ford that the charge port, there's a software update so that it can detect if the charge port's getting too hot. So I was like, okay, let's get this installed. It's been months and I should have had it by now. It kept showing that this was an open item on my car. And then I have this little, in the back of the car, there's like a little wind deflector in front of the rear tire on each side. There's two pieces that hold it on, and that had broken off, and it's been broken off for a while. So it's like, okay, kind of these three things seem worth a visit to go in. Well, all I ended up walking away with was rotated tires. And so the charge port update, the dealer said, yeah, Ford has stopped rolling out that update, so we can't, you know, deploy that. Even if we tried to, it wouldn't let us install that update. You know, two of their service advisors looked into it on the computer. They were like, yeah, we can't really find much more about this. A couple hours went by, you know, they're, oh, we'll go do the rotation. We'll look into this a little bit more. After that was over, they were like, okay, yeah, we really don't know more. You know, we'd have to go plug the car in and run some diagnostics on it to see if it got that update. But, you know, I wouldn't worry about it. And so it's just kind of weird. It didn't give me a great feeling like, does my car have this update or not? And they also didn't seem to really want to work on it either. This is a Ford dealer. And I don't know. The good news is they didn't charge me a bunch of money for work they didn't do. So I appreciate that. But they also took a lot of time and didn't tell me a whole lot. And I think some of it is they actually don't know. They have very little information from Ford or a good channel to get that information. So that was kind of disappointing. Doing some forum reading, it sounds like a newer power-up, one of the software updates that the car gets. It sounds like one of those newer versions addressed the charge port issue as part of that update. That's the best information I've found. So the car still shows that item is open on it. But I haven't had any problems. I just did a bunch of DC fast charging on this recent trip. And then the last one, that little wind deflector thing on the tire, they were like, oh, we might need to open a warranty item, you know, to figure out what's the right piece for that. You know, or they were like, well, we can just look in our parts bin and we might have something that would fit. I'm like, yeah, I just want this reattached. Well, they couldn't find anything that fit. I was like, okay, can you find what that part is and you know, give me a call and maybe we can order it. Well, they never called me. So it's just, they don't really want to work on these cars. I've been to two different Ford dealers. It's been kind of the same experience with both. The first Ford dealer with the whole smell AC thing, they had the car for 2 weeks. I had to keep calling to figure out what was going on. It feels like if I do have a big problem with this car, it could be kind of difficult to get fixed. Hopefully I won't. And so far, I really haven't had any big issues. So yeah, there's just been a lot of mystery kind of around some of the things about the car with the software. It's hard to tell exactly, you know, what software updates it's gotten and not gotten. There's obvious stuff like BlueCruise or the Tesla SuperCharger update, but there's kind of the behind the scenes stuff that you're not really sure what version you have. All right, well, I think that's it for today's video. You know, hopefully this was helpful. You know, generally the Mach-E's been a great car. It's been the most interesting car I've ever owned. I haven't had any major issues. You know, there's been some kind of little weird quirky stuff along the way, but nothing where I've been stranded. Every time I show up to some DC fast charger, I've always been able to charge at least one of the chargers. You know, the chargers I haven't been able to charge at seem like they were charger issues and not issues with the car. So I've never gotten stranded with it. It's always started up. I've had some of the weird phone as a key issues, you know, over time, but I'm always able to eventually get the car to start, even if it takes me an extra minute to relaunch the FordPass app. I think there's just a lot of little things that could be fine-tuned that would add up to a bigger difference. There's bigger stuff I'd love to see with the Mach-E. You know, if there's another generation of the Mach-E, you know, there's bigger stuff I'd like to see them do. But at least with this car and this platform, I think just some more tweaks on the software, you know, more info on the gauge screen, more visibility into what software updates I have and don't have, a little more education for the dealers. I think all of that would go a really long way. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.